European history from the late medieval period to the Second World War reveals a profound transformation in how societies understood faith, power, and human value. The long arc from the suffering of the Dark Ages through the violent successes of colonial expansion to the total wars of the 20th century produced not only new political and economic systems, but also a deep psychological shift. Across many cultures influenced or dominated by Europe, God, once the central moral reference point, was progressively displaced. In its place arose a faithless system grounded in economic exploitation, state power, and permanent preparation for war, ultimately redefining individuals as taxpayers, consumers, and instruments of the state. The European Dark Ages were marked by famine, disease, feudal oppression, and near-constant warfare. While Christianity remained institutionally dominant, everyday suffering created an unresolved tension between religious promises and lived reality. Faith persisted, but increasingly as obedience rather than spiritual assurance. This prolonged insecurity shaped a worldview in which survival mattered more than transcendence, and authority mattered more than moral truth. As Europe slowly emerged from this period, technological advances in centralized states did not heal this tension. Instead, they redirected it outward. The question shifted from why does God allow suffering to how can power prevent it? This subtle transition laid the groundwork for secular systems that promised security not through faith, but through control. European colonial expansion represented a decisive moral turning point. Empires grew wealthy not through ethical progress, but through conquest, slavery, and extraction. Institutions such as the British East India Company demonstrated that extreme violence and exploitation could produce immense prosperity. This success carried a dangerous lesson. Moral restraint was not necessary for dominance. On the contrary, ethical limits appeared to be weaknesses. Colonized cultures witnessed this contradiction firsthand. European powers preached Christian values while practicing systematic brutality. Over time, God was not merely rejected, he was exposed as politically irrelevant. Power, not righteousness, shaped history. As faith lost its authority, new explanatory frameworks filled the vacuum. Thinkers like Karl Marx argued that economic relations, not spiritual truths, were the true drivers of history. Even those who opposed Marxism accepted a similar premise. Humans could be understood, managed, and mobilized through material incentives. Meanwhile, sociologists such as Max Weber observed that religious ethics were being transformed into bureaucratic discipline, stripped of transcendence and repurposed for productivity and control. Economics became not just a system of exchange, but a theory of human nature, one that reduced individuals to labor units, consumers, and statistical risks. By the early 20th century, European states operated under a permanent logic of fear. Industrialization made war total, economies nationalized, and populations measurable. The two world wars, especially the second, confirmed policymakers' worst assumptions. Only fully mobilized societies could survive. In this environment, faith was seen as unreliable, personal, and slow. Economic control, taxation, and mass consumption were efficient and predictable. Citizens became resources. Obedience was reframed as civic duty. Consumption was portrayed as patriotism. Even outside Europe, nations adopted this model, believing it to be the only rational path to survival in a hostile world. The legacy of this historical trajectory is a global system in which God is absent from governance. Ethics are subordinate to strategy, and individuals are valued primarily for economic output. This was not a sudden rejection of faith, but a gradual erosion driven by trauma, conquest, and fear. What replaced faith was not neutrality, but a new belief system, one that trusts exploitation, militarization, and economic growth to provide meaning and security. In this sense, modern humanity did not abandon belief, it simply transferred it. God was replaced by the state, the market, and the promise that constant economic expansion could protect us from the chaos history had taught Europe to fear.